Many women is struggling with the feeling of powerless, where life challenges and past trauma seems overwhelming. This often leads to frustration, hopelessness, and a lack of control over our lives. That deep sense of uncertainty and lack of confidence that makes it hard to make decisions or take action to improve our circumstances. It's incredibly draining, right? Leaving us feeling stuck, overwhelmed, or disconnected from our true potential. Now, I know many of us has tried different ways to heal, right? Maybe you isolate yourself thinking that solitude might bring clarity, but it only made you feel more alone. Or perhaps you might temporarily distract yourself or looked for validation from others, but those things didn't really bring that lasting change that you needed, right? So what if there was a way to turn all that pain into something powerful, a way to reclaim your strength without draining you? Well, today we're going to be exploring that powerful topic of turning pain into power. Yes, pain into power. So, how can you transform your personal pain into a source of strength and empowerment? To help us answer this, we are joined with a special guest, and her name is Leah. Yes, Leah is a sexual assault driver turned advocate and activist. 11 years ago, Leah was sexually assaulted, and since then, she has used her story to advocate for others, transforming her pain into powerful tool for change. Leah will be guiding us through her journey and offering insight on how you too can harness your experience to fuel your empowerment and advocacy. But before we dive into that, I want to introduce myself for those who is new here. I am Rose. I'm your host here on a Sisters Love podcast. And I am just one woman with one voice trying to help other women heal. So if you are a woman on your healing journey, you're looking for a safe place, resources, or to be surrounded with love and support, then you are in the right place. We would love for you to be part of our sisterhood. All you have to do is hit that subscribe button, turn on your notifications, and don't miss another episode of a Sisters Love podcast. Don't forget to join our Facebook group called Sister Let's Heal Together. It's a place where we go deeper into the conversations that we start here. Share our stories, and you can get the support that you need to turn that pain into power. Well, I hope you're ready to turn your pain into power. Now, let's get started. Welcome to A Sister's Love, the podcast that helps women who are healing by having those deep conversations, giving practical advice and words of encouragement. Come on, let's talk about it. Hey, my beautiful sister. Today we have a beautiful guest. Her name is Leah, and I'm going to ask her a little bit about her story and why she's currently here on the podcast today and how she's going to help you guys overcome pain into power. So, Leah, can you please give us a little background about your story on what got you here today and how you can help them in their process of healing?
Yeah, first and foremost, thank you for having me, Rose. I appreciate the opportunity. Hey, everybody, I'm Leah M. Forney. I'm a sexual assault thriver turned advocate and activist. My story started being sexually assaulted January 27, 2013 in my apartment. I was living in the state of North Carolina at the time, fairly new to the state. Was there about 1.5 to 2 years when I met my perpetrator. And how we met was he was working at the local car rental place, and I happened to be there because I was looking to rent a car after my hoopty broke down on me. So when I wasn't successful in renting the car, he offered to drive me home. On the ride home, we made small talk, and he asked if he could take me out to dinner. I agreed. We went on one date, and sometimes you go on the date or you meet somebody and like your gut just tells you like, this is not a person that you should be associating with. That's kind of how I felt. So the very next day after our date, I let him know I just wasn't interested. You would think You could say that and move on with your life, right? But unfortunately, that didn't happen in my situation. He actually began to stalk me. And so the part of North Carolina I lived is kind of like a suburban area. You can pretty much get anywhere in like 10, 15 minutes. It just seemed like everywhere I was at, he would pop up. And on January 27, 2013, I was actually at home waiting on a friend of mine to come pick me up from church. I got a phone call that someone that I love dearly had passed away. So after I got off the phone and tried to get myself together while I was waiting on my friend, my perpetrator ends up calling me. He hears the vulnerability. He hears me being distraught. He asked me if I was okay. I was like, no, a loved one of mine had passed. He began to badger me about coming over to console me, to be supportive. Against my better judgment, I said yes. Little did I know he was already outside my apartment. When he came over, what was supposed to be a moment of consoling turned into a moment of him badgering me about how he was rejected and how he didn't appreciate it. So in that moment, I kind of knew something was going to happen. I'd never imagined it being rape. But something in my gut said, girl, you in danger. And you got to figure out how to get yourself out of this situation. So I proceeded to ask him at least 3 times to leave. On the 3rd time, when I thought he was actually getting up to leave, is when he actually got up, grabbed me, and proceeded to rape me in my living room. After he raped me, what probably felt like an eternity was definitely lasted a few minutes. He went about his business as nothing happened. So I did what most victims do, which is immediately want to go and take a shower. I know now that you should probably never do that because now your body is considered evidence. In that moment, I just wanted his scent, his touch, everything about him off of me. My girlfriend ends up getting to my house and I shared with her what happened. And she begins to proceed, get me to press charges. She's like, Leah, you have to call the cop. And I'll be honest with you, Rose, my first initial thought was like, I'm a Black woman in America. Who is going to believe me? Right? So there was hesitancy about calling law enforcement. It actually took me 2 days to call law enforcement. I was raped on a Sunday. I did not report till Tuesday. When I finally did have the courage to report, my biggest fear came true because law enforcement immediately started blaming me. Yeah. The detective that showed up at my house, he asked me 7 times, was I absolutely sure if I was raped, because I went on 1 date with the guy. And the female detective that proceeded over my case, she was very cold and callous. There was no empathy. There was no relating because we're women, like nothing. So after I did the part with law enforcement and I went to the hospital and had my rape kit, the next step was really to get a restraining order against him. And so after they tried to serve him twice, finally on the 3rd attempt, they served him. We ended up having our day in court so we can get a restraining order. And the judge, who happened to be a white male judge, told me that he did not believe I was raped and that I was a woman scorned. And he proceeded to get off his bench, go back into his chambers, and said nothing else. And he didn't dismiss us, he didn't do any of that. And finally, a few minutes later, he came back and he was like, oh, you still here? Case dismissed. So I'm watching my perpetrator walk out the courtroom with a smirk on his face. In his moment of victory, I'm distraught and I'm crying and carrying on. Then I had a white male sheriff basically say to me, if I didn't get myself together, he was going to lock me up. I'm looking at him like the irony because the person you should be locking up is now walking out these doors. In that moment, I had to make a decision. I had to decide how I was going to pick up the pieces of my life. After that, I made a decision to go to therapy at my local rape crisis center and just kind of begin the journey to healing. I really wish that I could say that's how the story ended, but fast forward to June of 2022, I get a phone call from the same police department who failed me the first time, letting me know 9 years after my rape that they had finally tested my rape kit and that they had a DNA match and they wanted to know what would I like to do. I remember telling the detective, I said, well, you always had his DNA because I didn't lie about being raped. So what I found out at that time was that here in the United States of America, we have a backlog of untested rape kits. There's literally over 100,000 untested rape kits throughout the United States. By that time that I got that phone call, I was already advocating. I was already in that space of activism, because of what happened to me. So it just kind of kicked my activism and my advocacy into overdrive because now I needed to educate people about this backlog. That is pretty much my story and how I took something so traumatic and began to turn it into power.
That's a lot. That's a lot, because the irony in this story is that January 27th is my birthday.
Hey, Aquarius, I'm the 30th, January 30th.
Yeah. And when it comes to him in this situation, nothing else ever happened to him.
Nothing else ever happened to him. Actually, when they called me about the DNA match, they kind of was like, do you want to prosecute? What do you want to do? And for me, it was like 9 years later. So I was already in my healing journey. I was already in a better place. I was just like, I'm not about to reopen this case.
Yeah, and that doesn't, because they process, doesn't mean they're going to do anything with it. Because again, 9 years later, all evidence is gone. The judge didn't believe you in the original hearing and order protection. What does that see? All that might do is just dig up old memories and anxiety and stuff like that. And you happen to see him or get him linked back up where you are now. It might start a whole nother cycle of abuse and stalking and stuff like that. So I agree. I probably would have let it go also, because I don't want to go back through the system that already failed me. Doesn't mean they're going to do right by me this time.
That's exactly how I felt. And I think that was the reason why that I was like, I'm a spiritual person. So I was praying and I was like, okay, God, if I got to relive this part of my journey, then what do I need to do to make it 10 times better? And that's when advocacy and activism really started to kick in, because I'm like, if it took 9 years for me, I can only imagine how many people are still waiting to get that same phone calls. For me, it was like, okay, how do I take this experience and really educate, and not just educate law enforcement and service providers, which I've done, but the masses, the different state communities, different people who may not even be aware that there is a rape backlog in the United States of America. So for me, it wasn't enough for him to go to jail. Like, okay, you go to jail and what?
And what? Exactly. And that's the part that hurts me the most when it comes to like abuse or rape or domestic violence or anything, when it comes to a man that you are known to be interacting with or dating. Because the same thing kind of happened with me with domestic violence. I called the police and I told them what happened. It was like, well, he lives here, so take a walk and come back later. I said, what you mean? Tell him to take a walk and come back later. That's ridiculous. That's like, there's nothing we could do. I just told you what happened to me. Yeah, your word against his word. Either you both go to jail or tell him to take a walk and come back later.
Yeah, and that's really how they do it. It's interesting because one thing that I've learned as an advocate in the work that I do is how easily victims of abuse now become what we call criminalized survivors. The one time you decide to speak up, the one time that you decide to fight back, now you're faced with potential criminal charges, right? When you're looking like, wait a minute, how did the roles just get reversed that quick? Because the person that you should be wanting to lock up is my abuser. And that's the most heartbreaking part of the system that we are in, because just like that, you can go from being a victim to now you're the survivor, like you're the criminal, even though you're being abused.
The crazy thing about that is because they think the system does. They said they do that now because they make it to court. They do all this processing, and a lot of people just never show, like the victims never show back up at court and stuff like that. So they like you're just wasting the court time and stuff like that. So they rather just not deal with it. Like, well, y'all not gonna. I remember one of the cops like, you're not gonna show up anyways. I said, you don't know what I'm gonna do. I said, but at this position right now, you're putting me in. I won't have an opportunity to show up, because you make it seem like the system is useless and there's no way that is going to help me anyway. So what faith do I have in processing this person? And then I go through all this and he knows now I'm a threat, and that can make that situation even worse. If they don't do what they need to do initially, and you get that abuser opportunity to have access to me again, then 9 out of 10, my situation is going to get worse. So yes, I'm going to do whatever they want me to do, or I'm going to act like I'm not going to do anything to keep my safety or keep me alive. And they don't understand that part of the system or the part of the process of processing someone that's abusing you or did something to you. Because if you're still giving them access to me, even though order of protection doesn't stop people from coming to get you, it's a piece of paper that says, don't come here. That means nothing. If someone is determined to get you, they're going to get you.
Yeah.
And they don't understand, and the cops don't care because like they feel like it's a waste of their time. Like, oh, this is just another story. And then when people get killed and stuff like that, and they're like, oh my God, maybe I should have took it serious. It's too late now.
Yeah.
Like the woulda, shoulda, couldas.
Yep.
Or when they found his DNA, they processed like 10 other girl DNA rape kits over the next 10 years, 10 years, and his DNA pop up. They're like, oh my God, he is serial rapist. We could have we could have nipped that in the butt 9 years ago when she came to us. But because you could have been his initial case, his first victim, because they did not process him, they gave him the courage to tell him that, oh, I can get away with this. I know exactly what to do. And he started that pattern, dating them and grooming them and just making it seem like, oh, they're jealous. Oh, I'm a ladies' man. Every time they do it, these women just jealous and they're just doing that because they scorn. And he started a pattern and he getting away with it because they keep letting him get away and he's not in the system. His DNA has not been added to the system because it took 9 years to process it.
Yeah, it's the biggest injustice. Like it literally continues to re-victimize survivors because it's one thing to be violated. It's another thing when the system violates you too, because you don't want to believe me, because you have your own biases and your own preconceived notions and your own prejudice. Like I tell people all the time, that white male judge, you can't tell me there wasn't an ounce of bias and racism in him. He saw a Black woman standing before him. We already know historically that Black women tolerate pain, that Black women, we have been experimented on because of our body. So you can't tell me none of that didn't run through his mind when he saw a Black woman standing before him and saying that this Black man sexually assaulted her.
Yeah, exactly. And that's ridiculous. That's out of control. So when we're talking about your advocacy, like what is some of the things that I know what got you into, like, what is some of the process that you did to start the advocacy?
Yeah, so the first thing I did was really, I just started speaking out about it. The very first time I ever spoke publicly about my sexual assault was at a Take Back the Night. And Take Back the Nights is typically done in the month of April because April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. They happen in various states, various communities. And it's really just a survivor speak out as an opportunity for survivors to come and share their story to the community at large. There's usually some type of protest, a demonstration, to get the community involved against fighting to end sexual violence. That was the first time publicly I ever talked about it. I was in therapy at the Rape Crisis Center who was hosting the Take Back the Night. And by that time, I had been in therapy for a couple of years. So my therapist was kind of comfortable with me openly and publicly sharing it. From there, I just continued to share my story, whether it was through media outlets, whether it was through writing a book, whether it was just other people asking me to come and speak and share. It started from there. Then I built on that by getting involved with other community partners and people that were doing the work. So my advocacy kind of kicked into overdrive when I started working with other organizations who was already doing the work, but what was missing was the survivor's voice. And that's one of the things that I encourage service providers to do is work with survivors, like those who are ready to tell their story, work with them, partner with them, pay them because they're experts, right? And there's a lot of our service providers, they do good with the data and all that stuff, but it's nothing like somebody that has had real world experience that can tell you what this is really going through the justice system and having to work with law enforcement and things of that nature. It started with just publicly telling my story, and then I built on top of that.
When you're talking about telling your story, I know it was hard for me. So is there any advice that you would like to give the listeners to give them the courage to actually start speaking out? Because it's a lot of healing in actually vocalizing your story and not actually feeling alone in the story. Because when I started to tell my story, people to I knew it was a reason why I connected with you, but I couldn't figure out why. It's like I felt the vibration. I was being attracted to you, but I couldn't figure out why. And then you start to talk, I'm like, oh, we relate. Our stories are similar, and I didn't feel alone. She's like, I already felt comfortable with you, but I didn't understand why. Like giving people that community or that support and stuff like that. Can you explain a little bit on how you got that courage and how it was when you started to speak out?
Yeah, I would say to anybody that wants to share their story, definitely make sure you've made peace with your own story. So prior to me ever telling my story, I was in therapy and then I had my relationship with God. Those two things combined, I really focused heavily on my healing after being sexually assaulted. And I started with just telling the people closest to me. So, like, before I even went public about it, I just started sharing it with friends that may have not known, family members that didn't know. Then after that, I wrote it in my very first book, which is called Unapologetically Me. And I talked about it there. Then once I found the courage to start sharing it publicly, I started on social media. I found that when I started to open up about it, like you said, you start finding your tribe. You start finding people that's like, oh, snap, I thought I was the only one that was experiencing this. Yeah. And so then I just became the voice for so many other survivors, like people that knew me, that knew I started doing this work. If their loved one was sexually assaulted, they would immediately connect us because they're like, I know somebody who's not only a survivor, but she does incredible work in helping survivors. Let me get you connected. Or if they've been sexually assaulted themselves, they started feeling comfortable coming and talking to me about it. So I always say, make peace with your story first, because it's very hard to tell your story if you're still emotionally being tugged on to tell your story, right? Like when you still are still crying in certain areas, still tug at you, then you're not where you should be healing wise. And I don't even want to say should, because everybody's healing journey is different, but just make sure that you can tell the story from a place of victoriousness and not a place of victimhood. And you'll know the difference because of how you tell it and how it resonates for you emotionally. Like I tell people all the time, I've told my story so much that I don't feel the same intense emotions I did the very first time I told it. So that's what my best advice, make peace with your story first and then start sharing it in small groups.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's why the therapy is important, because you'll probably get that emotional navigation in therapy or a professional setting before you go out into your family or your social circle. Like you need to have someone to help you navigate that story, that help you, like when you say this one part, like, why are you feeling what you're feeling right now and stuff like that. Even if you don't want to do therapy, like mirror that story to yourself and then see what's coming up and why it's coming up if you don't feel comfortable, because a lot of people don't feel comfortable with therapy and stuff like that. So it's still a way to navigate that story without a professional, but it's definitely like being comfortable with that story and navigating it and seeing what's coming up and reflecting on the feelings and emotions that's coming up when you are telling that story. For me, I thought I was good. When I started telling my story, I thought I didn't have emotional attachment to the story, but I still wasn't healed from the story. My story made me go numb. What happened to me made me numb. So when I told a story, it was like just another bad thing that happened in my life, because it was just combo. I have like complex PTSD because there's so many bad things that happened to me. It was just one more thing added to the list. It wasn't like, oh my God, so sad for me. Like, oh, I'm so sad. It's like, whatever, it is what it is, which is even worse because I never emotionally navigated it. It was just locked into my body and things like that. And one day I just exploded. And I was telling this, it's like, oh, it collapsed. It was so heavy. My body was so heavy. It was like one more bad thing happened to me and I collapsed and I was on overload.
Yeah. Yeah. I always tell people, like, you got to know and pay attention to your body. There's an amazing book that I love to read. It's called The Body Keeps the Score. If you really want to understand how trauma shows up in your body, that is a book that breaks it totally down. Just like you said, you'll think like, oh, I'm past it, right? And you have this moment and something triggers, and it could be something as simple as like you smell something and it reminds you of something in that moment. And all of a sudden you realize like, oh, wait, I'm not good. I'm not completely healed in that area. And that's why I think for me, it was so important that I had like 2 years removed from my sexual trauma before I publicly talked about it, because I knew I had to heal and I wasn't going to rush my healing process at all.
See, me telling my story put me in therapy, because I started to see how what was happening to me affect my children, because I got so overprotected. I got so scared of the world that I didn't want them to experience. I'm like, if I hover, if I protect, if I over control, what happened to me will never happen to them. I became this hover parent. I became overbearing. I became very protective. They started looking at me like I was crazy. I feel like I should be closer to my kids, and then whatever I'm doing is pushing further away. And it started to make me reflect on what's going on. And I started to talk to myself and start telling people my stories, and because I started feeling heaviness. And then I started to realize, yeah, I'm doing my family a disservice right now. And I started talking about it and do in small groups and stuff like that. I was like, yeah, I gotta go to therapy. I gotta go. That's when I really started to start my podcast and my business and stuff like that, being that advocate, being that voice. I don't see myself as an expert or a specialist. I just see myself as, I would say, the beginning of my podcast, I'm just one woman with one voice trying to help other people. You know what I'm saying? So I just my voice, our stories need to be heard. And our stories is going to unlock somebody else's story, which is going to help them start their healing process. Now it's the biggest goal here. Even though it happened to us, we don't have to sit in it. It's a lot of things that happen. It's not exactly what happened to you, is what you do with what happened to you. Because we can't change the past, but we can change how it affects our future.
Yeah. Yeah. And I totally agree with you. I always tell people, even when I still travel to speak, it's if I can just touch one survivor that finds the courage in their own voice to share their story, then I've done my job. If I can educate one service provider on how to best service survivors, then I've done my job. I don't do this to be oh, I want to just help the masses. Sometimes the masses is that one person that all of a sudden finds the courage to say, okay, if Rose went through it and she survived, I can go through it and survive too. If we that's what we do it for. It's not to be oh, I just want to be this world renowned person. I tell people all the time, if I could choose what my life's work probably would not be it. I would probably pick something very easy, very chill to do it. I would probably not ever talk about my sexual trauma, but I know that I'm called to this work. So when you know that you're called to this work, you kind of just be all right, it's not about me. It's about the people that need me. It's about those that are still suffering in silence. I've spoken at so many events and I've had survivors sexually assaulted as children who are now grown adults and they're still stuck there. It's not until they hear a survivor's voice and they hear someone tell their story that they're oh my God, I can break free from this. So that's what this is all about.
Yeah. So can you go in a little detail about how your advocacy works? How do you navigate? You start with the speaking, or how do the advocacy?
Yeah. It's funny how I got into advocacy. It started really, 2018, me and a good friend of mine who has since passed away, my girl Carmen, we started an organization called Save Me. Really, Save Me stood for sexual assault advocacy for victims everywhere. We did it because we just wanted to bring awareness to sexual assault. We were both sexual assault survivors. We had these PSAs that we decided to do where we get other survivors to tell their story. And we did it. We shared it through the month of April. Once we started doing that, people really started to take notice and they started to realize sexual assault is a problem. We really should probably talk about it more. So after she passed away, we started Save Me February of 2018. Unfortunately, her life was cut short in September because she was murdered by her husband as she was leaving. So I put it on pause because I was I couldn't see myself continuing to work without her. This was something we started together. I got fully into advocacy when people started calling on me. It was people knew that I was doing it, but I was trying to do other things. And I don't really want to be in that space, but I couldn't run from it. Because the more people saw me, the more people heard about my story, the more people started calling on me. When people started calling on me, they would call on me for a variety of things. They would call on me to train their staff to come in and share their story with their community. I've been blessed to do it in so many different sectors. I've done colleges and universities. I've trained law enforcement and had conversations with law enforcement. I've trained victim advocates. The Attorney General's office has reached out. I actually have to go to New York and do a training with the United States District Attorney's Office. They want to train their attorneys about how to best help survivors. It really just started as me bringing awareness to sexual assault, sharing my story, educating people about the backlog. Then it built on from there where people started to ask me to come speak and ask me to come train because they found my story to be of value. So that's pretty much how it started.
Okay, you give me some of the things that you will tell some of the victims to do when this does happen to them. What are some of the things that they should do as soon as they want to report rape or something to the police, so they don't end up in the system being F you, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would tell the survivor, knowing what I know now, is that if you've been sexually assaulted, do not take a shower. Your body is now evident, literally. And so I would definitely encourage to, if nothing else, go to your local emergency room and get a rape kit done. Because again, your body is evidence. And so you want to preserve that evidence. Now, the thing is, if you're going to do that, you have to do it within 72 hours. There's a time window as to when you can go get a rape kit. That evidence can be used for investigations and prosecution. So you have to get it done within 72 hours. But that would be one of the first things. Do not take a shower. Do not change your clothes. None of that, because literally you're now evidence. So go to your local rape crisis, your local emergency room, get a rape kit done if you do nothing else. Now, there are some emergency rooms and some rape crisis centers that now do what we call anonymous reporting. Anonymous reporting is basically you can report the crime to a law enforcement agency without giving your information. Now, depending on the state, that may work and it may not work. The reason why I say that is because depending on the state, an anonymous report is just a report. They might not test your kit, so you'll never know if whether or not there was DNA found or anything of that nature. So you have to keep that in mind. There are some states where they're now trying this thing where a law enforcement agent might be present when you go to do the rape kit, and you can ask them questions like, hey, if I do proceed with this and actually report, what does that look like? Just so you can kind of get more information. And they're doing this and testing it out in different states just to see if that's going to help with the mistrust issue that they know that the reason why most people don't report is because they don't want to deal with law enforcement. So it's kind of their way of making it easier for people to report. But the other thing, once you get that kit, you just have to make a decision on whether or not you want to prosecute. Now, I always tell people, know your state statute of limitations. Every state has a different statute of limitation. Here in Maryland, where I live, if it's rape 1, you do not have there's no statute of limitation. So you want to know the state's statute of limitation, because if you're going to hesitate on getting law enforcement involved, that again, the clock is ticking. So you kind of put yourself in a position where if the statute runs out, there's nothing you can do. You kind of want to know the state statute of limitation and then make a decision on whether or not you do actually want to file a report. Filing a report does not necessarily mean there will be prosecution. It just means that you're documenting what happened. There will be a possible investigation into what happened. Then if law enforcement and the Attorney General's office kind of deems like, oh, this is something we can prosecute, then that's when they'll give you the next steps. But more than anything, I tell them, at least get the rape kit done. It's your evidence now. You might as well preserve that evidence. And if you make a decision a day later, 2 days later, weeks later, that you're ready to really file the report, at least you've done that step and you've preserved that evidence. So you can tell law enforcement, listen, I've already gone to the emergency room. I've already got the rape kit done. This is when I went, and they can go collect that evidence, see what they need to do to prosecute if there's an option for persecution.
Is there any advice you could give them if they do go through the system and they do get in front of a judge like you? Is there anything that they can do to help process that? Like if you have a judge just bias or something like that, is it a process they can go through to get the judge removed off their case, or get a better lawyer, or try to get some support in the legal system that's not supporting them?
Yeah, the thing that I would tell you is that most of the time when you go to a emergency room and you do your rape kit, they immediately connect you with your local rape crisis center. So typically there is a victim advocate that will meet you at the emergency room. What I always recommend is talk to that victim advocate. Let them know what is it that you're going to need. Let them know, hey, I'm thinking about taking the legal route. Can you connect me with some resources? Oftentimes, they can get you connected with the DA's office. They can get you connected with a lawyer free of charge who can help you with your case if you choose to go that route. I would also say just be prepared as possible. Unfortunately, when it comes to survivors and victims of abuse, we get criminalized. We are put on stand as if it's all us. It's our fault. We did it. We caused it, all of that. You kind of got to go into it with the mindset of this system is not really designed to help you, right? It's more designed to protect perpetrators until we continuously do the work to change that. that's how it's going to be. So once you go in with that mindset, it will help. The one thing that I had was my grandmother was with me, so I had support. I highly recommend, like, don't go through that process with the courts by yourself. Like, oftentimes, if you're connected to an attorney, they have an advocate. Like, you have support. Utilize your support. If you have family and friends that you've told, definitely ask them, hey, can you be with me in court that day? Like I said, my grandmother was with me in court that day. I did not have to go through that alone. The victim advocate that I was assigned was with me in court that day as well. So you want to have that support with you, because there's a likelihood that you're going to stand before this judge in open court. It's not a closed court session. Everybody that's waiting to hear their case before this judge is going to be right there. You're going to have to tell the story. And there is a likelihood that you might have a biased judge like I did, who is ready to tear you to shreds. Or you might have someone that's very empathetic to what happened. But either way, I would say do your best to emotionally and mentally prepare yourself, but also make sure you have your support with you.
I was just thinking, like, it's crazy how the perpetrator goes in front of the judge innocent until proven guilty, and the victim goes in front of the judge guilty until proven innocent.
Yep.
That's
literally how it works.
That is crazy, and it's unfair.
Yeah.
And that's why I feel like that's why a lot of victims are stuck in that victimhood, because I never got justice. Nobody ever seen me. Like, you don't understand what I've been through. So they're screaming and hollering and trying to get heard and seen, because no one ever justified what they've been through. And it's always been an excuse like, yeah, we have no proof that happened, but I'm telling you. What I tell people a lot when it comes to someone's story, it's not my job to tell you if that did or did not happen to you. It's my job to hold space for you to listen. You know what I'm saying? A lot of people don't hold space. They go into judgment, they go into acts and questions and private and try to figure out what's going on. No, just hold space for some people, and that will give them the opportunity to move forward. Just be able to just hold that space for them.
Yeah, really, just right. Like, one of the things I always tell people is, like, validation is not saying it was right or wrong. It's just, like you said, it's holding space. It's saying, dang, I'm so sorry that you experienced that. That apology, that recognizing and validating can be a life-changing experience for a victim or a survivor, because then they start to feel. It's when you're in situations like this, when you know without a shadow of a doubt that someone has hurt you, someone has violated you, someone has abused you, and then you take up the courage to be like, oh, let me go and share it, only for the powers to be looking at you like you're the guilty one and this person is innocent. That's why I always stress, you gotta apologize. You gotta let victims and survivors know that they're heard and that they're seen, and that what happened to them is messed up.
Yeah.
Whether you believe it or not. That's the reality.
Yeah, that's not just with the system too. That's just in life, period. You're gonna have family that don't believe you, especially if the rapist is someone in the family or someone they're close to them. It's gonna be people that's gonna deny it because they don't want to believe it. That means they will have to change their perspective of that person and change how they interact with that person. So you also have to be prepared for it in your social life and in your world, period. Especially if you're sharing on social media, there's always gonna be people that's going to have backlash. You're always going to have backlash in every aspect of your life. So if you're going to talk about your story, you just have to, like you said, prepare yourself to be emotionally ready to have those people that's going to attack you for just being a victim.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, like, in sexual assault, rape culture is a thing. Victim blaming is a thing. What did you wear? Why did you go to that bar? Why was you looking cute? So you mean to tell me I just can't go out and look cute on a regular day and not have to worry about some creep deciding that tonight is the night that they want to violate me? You know, like, victim blaming is a thing. You know, same thing in domestic violence. It's, well, why did you stay? Why you ain't leave before? As if it's easy. That's one of the things I stress when I train law enforcement, that a survivor making a decision whether or not to move forward with prosecution is not something that they can decide right in the moment, not even the next day. You have to give them the space and the grace to process what has happened to them and allow them the time to make a decision. It's not that easy, contrary to people's belief. I even think about just the recent stuff with Diddy. When it came out what he did to Cassie, immediately the world wanted to blame her. Then the proof comes out. Now it's, oh my God, Cassie, But why do we go straight to victim blaming? Why do we not believe survivors immediately when it happens? Like, I don't know anybody that sits around and lies about being victimized and being violated. I tell people all the time, we know statistically less than 5% of every sexual assault case has only been found untrue.
Exactly.
Less than 5%.
That's because they, like I said before, it's the person that's being accused. It's the person that's being accused, and they don't want to let go of that person, that idol that they have. They don't want to let go of that person. If they have to see them different, like that means they have to change something about themselves in the way they interact with people. And it's like sometimes most of the victim blame has nothing to do with the victim. It has more to do with that person. If I have to shift who I am and change the way I view the world, that means I have to do some work. I'd rather not do the work. I'd rather just make you feel like it, and I can keep seeing the world the way I want to see it. So that's how it is. Most of the people, they don't really care about what happened to you. They just care about how they have to change and how they have to shift. It's easier for them to just make you feel like shit and make you feel like that didn't happen to you because I'm not doing the work.
Yeah. Pretty much.
We're a better place. I don't mean, if I actually see, if I know that this is true and I've seen that this happened, then I have to actually use my voice. I have to actually make sure things shift the way life is happening around me and the way people are interacting with me and the way I'm interacting with people, the way I'm perceiving the words that I'm saying, the ways that the things that's coming up for me. Because a lot of people talk and do things and say things a specific way and they don't want to change it. It's just like when I was in a relationship, at first I used to hate when my boy was like, oh, please don't wear that outside. Don't wear that. Don't do stuff like that because it's going to bring attention to you. I'm like, I don't give, it's my body. I can do what I want. And then he broke it down to me. He was like, it's not that I'm trying to control you. It's just that I know what guys think. He like, I know how they perceive women. He's like, it's not nothing to do with you. I'm not trying to control what you do, but I know once you walk outside this house without me, I won't be there. I won't be there to protect you. So you going out in that outfit will put eyes on you and it might put the wrong eyes on you. And a lot of women don't understand it like that. They think that, oh, this man is trying to control me. In some aspect, it could be. But if your man sit down and explain it to you like he did to me, I'm like, oh, I get it now. He's like, I can't protect you. I'm not there. When you're with me, feel free to wear this all you want because I'm here to protect you. But outside of me, you're going to go into a club, you're going to go into a space where it's men that's creepy. You think that they're just attracted to you and they have this crazy mindset. And if you say no, and some men don't know how to understand the word no, it can go to a level that you would never want it to be. So I don't like when people say, like, when people put perspective to words and understanding, you start to see the world a little bit different. You know, once he said that, I was like, I didn't want to change. But after he gave me that, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, it's unfortunate that, again, we live in a time where we have to think like that. We have to be mindful of what we wear. We have to be mindful of who we're around. And when you're a survivor of abuse, like, I don't know about anybody else, but I always tell people my observation is on 1,000. Everywhere I go, I can pick up on predatory behavior, like family cookouts. You know, I have a daughter and like, trust me, I try not to be the overbearing mom. She's 10, but we had a family cookout. I'm easily like, my radar is on 1,000 and her dad knows it. Like, we had a situation where somebody in the family, like a family friend, was like literally following my daughter around the family barbecue. I picked up on it so quick. And this is a grown behind man. Like, even though he was developmentally delayed, he's still a grown behind man. And I was like, yeah, we got a problem. When her father got wind, it was like, oh no, we got to get up out of here. Because the truth of the matter is, perpetrators are everywhere. Like, everywhere. So our job is to not only protect ourselves, but again, when you have kids, for those who have kids, educate your children about what to look out, because they are the people that you trust. They are the coaches and the teachers and all of that. I do my best to not do it in a way where my kids feel like, ooh, I got to look out for every teacher and every person. But I do it in a way that they understand there are some people in this world that just want to cause harm. And you got to be mindful about those things. That's why I'm big on early intervention. I'm big on educate your kids and really educate them. Don't call your child's vagina a pocketbook. Tell her she has a vagina. Like, don't, you know what I mean? Because we do that. We want to downplay it and give these little pet names. But then the sad part is you didn't told your daughter that her vagina is a pocketbook this whole time. When she's now trying to tell you someone's been touching her pocketbook, you don't even remember you told her that it was called a pocketbook. She's been trying to tell you this whole time. But if you properly educate your child about the parts of their body, then they could be comfortable and say to you, like, hey, somebody's touching me.
Exactly. I do the same thing. Like, listen, I be doing stranger danger, all of this. I don't care. I told my daughter's 7. I'm like, I don't care if it's the closest person to mommy. If somebody touch you, we do not. I said, you already know what mommy say. Somebody has to ask permission to touch you. If you don't give them access to touch you, then they don't have the right to touch you. And she was like, yeah, because she don't even let me. I'm like, I go and give her a hug. She's like, mommy, did you ask for a hug? I said, you right. She even be calling me out. I said, okay, is it okay if I give you a hug right now? She's like, yeah, mommy, it's okay. But instead of that, it's hurt so much that she even started calling me like, I can't get mad because it's something that I want her to do. So even if she's calling me out and I'm closest to her and she trusts me, I know she's going to call the next person out when I'm not around. That makes me happy when she does confront me, and especially in her emotions and everything, she has that comfortability to come to me and talk to me about anything that's going on with her. She's 7 and she even be writing me letters. If she don't feel comfortable, she's like, Mom, you hurt my feelings. I'm like, okay. All right.
Yeah, I love that. It's so important. Like body autonomy is so important to teach our kids. It's so important to tell your kids it's okay to say no. It's okay to say, yes, you need to ask my permission to touch my hair, do anything. Like, it's okay. I love that kids are starting to learn that and apply it. Like, it is okay. I saw a TikTok video with this young girl and her aunt, and the aunt was like reaching to give her a hug, and she literally took her aunt's hands and put them and was like, you need to respect boundaries. And I was like, yes, like, it is okay to teach your kids that, listen, if auntie so-and-so want to hug you and you don't want to hug auntie, it's okay.
It's not disrespectful. Don't let nobody convince you that it's disrespectful.
No.
That's the older generation. They be like, oh, that's disrespectful. I want to give they don't want to hug. So we're okay with not giving hugs. Because if I'm a ass person, if I don't want to hug, you tell me I got to hug you? No. So why don't they have a say so?
It's absolutely okay. It's okay if your child don't want to go sit on Uncle so-and-so's lap. Like, it's okay, because again, predators are everywhere. If we be honest, a lot of child sexual abuse happens with people they know. Oftentimes it's in their family. So you trying to force your child to be like, go give your uncle a hug. No, if they don't want to hug them, then they don't want to hug them. And for my parents, that should be a red flag. Like, if your child don't want to be around a certain person, you should probably have your antennas up high enough to be like, why doesn't my child want to be around that person? Like, I always tell people, pay attention to how your child responds to the adults in their life. Like,
they have energy. Yeah. Kids know we're energy. They're like, nah, maybe that person they might not did nothing to them, but they don't feel comfortable. Like, I don't know what that energy is. I'm okay. I'm gonna stay over here. And I'm like, with you. Like, I would read my kids' energy, because when I was a kid, I read energy and I didn't like certain people and certain things. I was right. A lot of things happen, but parents don't care. Some parents don't care. Some parents don't understand because they think family comes first. 9 out of 10, family is the problem, because family keep the secrets. Family doesn't expose people. And the more secrets you keep, the more victims you get. Like, no, we're not over here. I said, not this generation. I said, not mine. Ain't no rug. Ain't nobody tripping over nothing under nobody rug. I'm exposing everybody and everything. And they was like, and once I started telling my stories, I started exposing people in my family, and they didn't like it. They was like, hold on, you can't call me out. So I can do whatever I want. I'm not saying that you got to do anything about it, but I'm no longer keeping your secret due to, I need to heal. So that's, if you're in part of my story where you was one of the person that was trying to shield what happened to me, I'm going to say it. Like, and it's a warning to other people in the family. Let them know, if something happened, you don't go to this person, because they're not going to help you. They're going to hide the situation or try to cover it up and make you think that it's something that is not. Like, oh, it's okay, baby. And like, no, your family needs to be aware. Just like people outside, you need to help your family members too. Yeah, like that's the part that sucks. But and even like with my mom, her situation, like, she was raped when she was a kid by a family member. And as I started telling her story, she opened up to me. And she was like, and now I know why she didn't protect me in certain areas, because she was never protected and she didn't know how to protect me. She didn't know what to do with what I gave her. I'm like, it makes sense now. So me helping myself was I was able to help my mom. So our relationship ended getting better and stuff like that. She's overprotected. Now she got her antennas up. Like sometimes the older generation, you can open them up because a lot of them, they might have suffered too. And they're like, I dealt with it. So you can deal with it. Nobody ever helped me. So why should you get any exception?
It's true. That it's really true. Like I had my mom, same thing. God rest her soul. Like before she passed, like we had that conversation. I learned about her molestation as a child and how it led her to like years of doing drugs. I remember like when I found out, it was right at like a couple of years after I was sexually assaulted, and I remember her crying hearing that I was sexually assaulted, and then she was just like, all I ever wanted to do was protect my kids. I remember saying to her, like, Mom, but who protected you?
Yeah.
Like you can't really give what you never had. So oftentimes it don't be that our parents don't want to protect. It's like, how could I give something that never happened to me? Like who protected me when it was somebody that was touching me inappropriately? You're right. Like sometimes we can heal our parents by them seeing us heal and go through our own journey and share our own story. It gives them the same courage to finally like break free from what they've been through too.
Yeah. As we're talking about healing, I have a game called Pathway to Healing, and this is the perfect way into that game. It's pretty much like I'm giving you a scenario about someone going through something, and you'll just help them navigate what they can do to help them start their healing in that process. It's questions like back and forth. I give you a question. I read the scenario to you. You give your insight, and then I'll read a scenario for me, and then I'll give my insight. It's like only 4 scenarios. So the first one is Alice is 36. She has always felt that the need to control over every aspect of her life, from organizing family gatherings to planning vacations down to the last detail. This constant need to control caused her significant stress and anxiety, especially when things do not go as planned. She finds herself micromanaging her children activities, worrying excessively about their future. Alice wants to learn how to get out. She wanted to learn how to let go and trust the process of life more, hoping to reduce her stress and enjoying her life and family more. Is there any advice and steps that you can give her to help her in this scenario?
Well, first I would say, girl, I so understand, because I used to be a control freak. I think the thing that has helped me to really navigate letting go is really understanding what's in my control and what's not in my control, right? So oftentimes when people struggle with control issues, it's because they're trying to control things that's not in their control. Like I can't control waking up the next day. I'm not the creator of the universe. I'm not God. But I can control what I do with the 24 hours that he gives me when I wake up the next day, right? So it really looks like just taking inventory of what is it that's in my control that I can actually control, and what is it that I can't control. Once you take inventory of those things, when you recognize what you cannot control, then it's really surrendering it to whoever your higher power is and realizing like, all right, I'm going to put that in your hands and let you do what you need to do with it. And I'm just going to focus on my part and what I can do in this situation. That has always been helpful for me. Journaling has been helpful. Again, it allows me to take inventory about what is it that is in your control. If you can't control the outcome, then what can you do? And then just practicing for me, gratitude, right? Because again, sometimes when we want to stay in a place of control, it's usually because somebody has violated our trust and we feel like we now have to grab hold of the little bit or a lot of control that we have. Sometimes it's just grounding yourself and getting back to a place of centeredness, and gratitude helps you with that, because then you start to realize, okay, I'm putting more anxiety on me than I need to. Like one of the things my therapist used to always say, she'd be like, Leah, you create your own anxiety. When I realized that I do, I started being like, okay, let's stop creating your own anxiety, because you're trying to control outcomes that at the end of the day, you can't control. It's going to be what it's going to be. So definitely take some inventory of what's in your control and what's not in your control. And the things that are not in your control, get to a place where you can surrender it to your higher power and realize that, okay, I can't control that outcome, but I can control these outcomes. And you shift your focus to what you can control.
Totally agree with that. And I think I want to add to that is acceptance. Like we accepting what happened, like, okay, accepting I can't control this. I can't do it. Accepting what happens or what situation is going on. Like in most situations, like with our kids, we're over like to become overbearing and stuff like that because we can't accept what happened to us. So we're trying to control the next outcome or what's going on. Like accepting this happened to me. There's nothing I could do about it, but it happened to me. And now what's next? Like with that aspect, you're just giving yourself the power to like move forward, like understanding like this is what it is.
Yeah. And I always like to tell people like acceptance is just accepting the reality of what it is.
It's what it is.
Right. That's it. It's just like accepting, okay, I was raped. That's the reality of what it is. Once you've gotten to the place of that, now you can start to pick up the pieces and be like, okay, so now what's next?
What's next?
Do I let it define me or do I start to redefine it? You know, like I tell people, I was sexually assaulted 3 days before my birthday. For years, it felt like a dark cloud. Now it's my rebirth day. I kick off every year my birthday on that day because I took my power back. I was like, I'm not going to let this keep defining me. We're going to remove this dark cloud. Now it's a moment of celebration. But I had to get to that place of accepting like it happened. Can't go back that day. All I can do is move forward. So, yeah.
Yes, that's all it is. And put a name on it. A lot of people don't like to put a name on it. Like something happened to me. Like, no, put a name on it. Say what it is. Or the feelings, their emotions, because like, oh, I'm feeling kind of funny. No, say your emotions, accept the emotion, accept the incident, accept the trauma, accept it, and put a name on it. Because if you don't put a name on it, you can never navigate it. You can never understand what it is because you just like living in cloud nine, like it's just hovering over you, and it's like this dark cloud just hovering over you because you don't know what it is. I'm always getting rain. I'm always wet because you never put a name on it. You never got that umbrella to cover you. You know what I'm saying? So that's how. Yeah. So let's move on to the next scenario. Lily is 32. She often felt emotionally numb as a coping mechanism from past trauma, including a difficult childhood and recent breakup. She goes through the motions of daily life without feeling genuinely happy or sad or sadness, which affects her relationship with friends and family. Social gathering and felt empty, and she struggled to connect with people on deeper levels. Lily longs to reconnect with her emotions, to feel joy and sorrow deeply again, and engage more authentically with her loved ones. So with that numbness, that's funny that one I got that question because I resonate with being numb. I usually don't feel anything. And that's because, like I just said, last minute, I never put a name on it. I never acknowledged what happened to me or acknowledge what was going on. It was like life was just life. So until my recommendation is to reflect, like, why don't you feel happiness? Why don't you feel sadness? Because you're blocking it. You're intentionally choosing to block that emotion because you feel like if I go into that emotion, especially happiness, if we go into happiness, we feel like someone's going to steal it from us. So we block it. Like I'd rather feel nothing than someone steal it from me. And sadness, nobody really want to be sad, but sadness is a gateway to happiness. You have to feel sad and anxiety. You have to feel sad. You have to feel all that anger and frustration for you to make it to happiness, because you have to release it, because if we hold on to it, it controls us. I was numb for a long time. I felt nothing. So my way was reflecting on it. If this something great happened to me, like even when I first started my business, I'm like, I should have been excited. People are reaching out to me. People are asking me. And I'm like, I didn't feel nothing. I'm like, why is that? It's because I was scared. So reflecting on the moments that you should be happy and the moments that you should be sad and feeling why. Just doing journaling, like you said, journaling, breaking down what happened to you and what moments, or I like to call it root chasing. Like, when was the last time that I felt happiness and what stole it from me? Or when is the last time I felt sadness and why did I stop feeling it? I like to go back to the root of things and try to navigate that initial moment of what happened to me and break it down and see where the disconnect coming and try to reconnect it in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so good. Like I used to struggle with numbness too. I think for me, it has been numbness is typically a way to protect yourself, right? Like if I don't feel, I'll be fine. So what I had to do in therapy actually was give myself permission to feel. Therapy was probably the first time that I ever allowed myself to cry, any of that, especially if you're coming from a minority community of color, things like you're kind of taught to tough that shit out.
Yeah.
like we don't cry over here. You tough it out. But the reality is like that thing be killing you, right? So I had to give myself permission to start feeling and to start crying. It was weird at first because it was like all these emotions started coming up because again, like you say, you block it. But then once I started giving myself permission, then I started putting things in place like the journaling, processing what I feel. Because I used to be a person, like I'm a New Yorker, so I used to be a person like 0 to 100 real quick. Like I always tell people I'm a shoot first, ask questions later type of person. Like that's just me. we're gonna spew it off real quick and then I'm gonna come back and get some clarity. But I realized that because of how I was raised and the trauma that I had endured from a child on, I became a very reactive person. People that are typically numb are very reactive. And so what I had to learn is actually how to respond. Responding taught me how to just pause in a moment, process what I'm feeling, and then come back and have a conversation. Sometimes that means a day later. Sometimes that means 2 days later. Sometimes that means a few days later, however long it takes you to process it. But the way you break through that numbness is really giving yourself permission to feel and process what you're feeling. Like literally sit with it. If I'm just gonna sit with it, then I'm gonna ask myself, okay, so why are you pissed off? What happened? What's triggering this response? I'm gonna go through all of that. Then once I get on the opposite side of the emotion and now I'm in this place of logic, then I can have conversations. Because the thing about emotions that I've learned, and my therapist has always said it, is that your emotions are not right or wrong. They just are.
They just are.
They're not facts, they're feelings, right? So you got to be okay with being like, all right, this is the feeling. Now, once I process the feeling, now what's the facts?
Yeah. I love that you said that because I tell people that all the time, like, you cannot base facts on feelings because you're making assumptions and you're making conclusions that do not equal the actual thing. Especially when you've been through trauma, a feeling it can equal rejection, abandonment. You know what I'm saying? That's not exactly what it was going on in the situation. But since you felt that way because this was a trigger, you have felt that this person is attacking you, abandoning you, or leaving you, or trying to make you feel some type of way, and it's just a repeat, it's just a trigger. And it's just something that they said, like you said earlier, you smell something that triggers something. A word can do the same thing, or an action can do the same thing. Someone walking out in the middle of a conversation could be abandonment to you because this happened in your past. And that when someone walked out before, they never came back. Yeah. And you just associated with them leaving and never like, this person is leaving me. Oh my God. Now what would have been at a 2 is now at a 10 because you don't want that person to leave. You're like, I don't want to get abandoned. I don't want to be rejected. And you go into protective mode. Like, I got to protect myself now. I got to protect I don't ever want to feel this again. You're not going to abandon me. And then you go crazy. And a small situation turned into a 10. You now understanding why, and you justify this person left me. In your mind, you're telling like, they left me. I don't care what nobody said. You was going to abandon me. Prove it. You walked out the door, but you didn't. Yeah. Do the clues. You didn't do the clues around it. Like, yeah, I told you I was leaving because I needed to cool down. I told you I couldn't have this conversation right now. And you're not in the mindset to have this conversation. So I'm going to give you a moment. But you ain't hear none of that. All you see was them walking out the door. Yep. You neglected all that. And you said when you calm down, you could actually do the facts like the person did say this and say that. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I assumed that. And then that gives you a space to work on, know that what you still have to work on. Now I really have to work on this part. When people walk out or communicating with that person, like, yeah, I'm still in a place that I'm not comfortable with people walking away from me, and communicate with them. Like, is it a different way that we could get space without you walking out on me? You know what I'm saying? So that can help you in your healing process. You're able to deal with someone walking out. You know what I'm saying? Being open once you do get those facts, being open with the person, people that you're talking to, and letting them know your struggles at what you're going through. So it can help you and it can actually help them too. It can make their life a lot easier and yours a lot easier too.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And we're going to get to the last one. And Roberta, 28, cannot let go of her guilt and past mistakes, such as failed relationships and hurtful decisions she made in her earlier teens. She frequently replayed old scenarios in her head, analyzing what she could have done differently. This constant reminder prevents her from moving forward and fully embracing her current life, including her close friendships and personal growth. Rebecca wants to break free from her forgiving herself and focus on positive aspects of her present and future, building healthier and more fulfilling life.
That's so good.
Yeah.
I think the first thing that comes to mind is self-forgiveness.
Yeah.
Right? Because oftentimes what keeps us stuck is that we haven't forgiven ourselves for the parts we play in the storms that we've created, right? We play some parts, right? Whether it's we stayed in a relationship longer than we should, whether we hooked up with a friend that we just knew wasn't a good friend, but my friend. And so oftentimes you gotta take inventory, and you gotta really ask yourself that courageous question, like, what role did I play in this situation falling apart? Right. And once you come to the terms of like the role that you play, you got to then really forgive yourself. I think the reason why people struggle with forgiveness is because they forget that the first step to forgiveness is you. Because until you let you off the hook, how are you going to let somebody else off the hook? Like, you have to start with you. Definitely, I would say practice some self-forgiveness and really let you off the hook. Understand that we all make the decisions we make based on the tools that we have at the time. Maybe you just didn't have the right tools, or you had limited tools. That doesn't make you a bad person. That doesn't mean that you are horrible at relationships. Like I tell people all the time, if I look at 15, 16, 17-year-old Leah trying to navigate relationships, and then I look at damn near 40-year-old Leah trying to navigate, child, we got two different sets of toolboxes, right? Because that young girl had daddy issues and mommy issues, and she was just trying to find love. This grown woman knows what she deserves and knows what she's worthy of, and all of that. You got to have self-forgiveness, and you got to just forgive yourself for the tools that you may have had, the lack of tools you may have, and really let yourself off the hook and be like, all right, I screwed up. I'm not going to make that mistake again. Then come up with a plan on how you're going to move forward.
Yep, that's exactly what I'm like. And having self-compassion, like I used to replay stuff in my head so much, like, why did I do that? How the hell did I do it? Like, why did I do that? And then I had to tap into myself, because it was something inside of me that needed safety, or something inside of me that needed that at that moment. So I had to do that, because we don't realize that if you're doing something that doesn't make sense, it's because it made you feel safe in some form, some way. If you're healing and you've been through trauma, our main thing is safety. We're looking for a place to feel safe. Even sometimes unsafe places is safety for us, because it's common and it's comfortable and we're familiar with it. So if you keep doing something over and over and over, and like, why do I keep doing it? Because in some form, in some way, it makes you feel safe. And I have realized from like, I kept replaying things in my head. Like, it was like a movie. I'm like, what is going on? I cannot let this go. I had to tap in of like, why do I keep doing this? And I had to figure out and what point and what place did I feel safe in that? And once I felt like that, and I had to rewrite that safety plan. I had to rewrite my safety plan. Sometimes we have to rewrite our safety plan and understand what is making us feel safe, or making us feel comfortable, and why it is. Once we start to tap into that, then you can actually get some of those replays out your head and show yourself compassion. And like you said, forgive yourself.
Yeah. Because you just didn't know. Like, again, you're going based on what you knew at the time. Like, I tell people, when I was 19 in an abusive relationship with a man whose mom and dad both were addicts, I didn't know that was, I just knew here's a man that had similar trauma that I did. We were just supposed to be together because we were the perfect couple. I know now that you should have probably ran far and far away. At years old, I didn't know that. Yeah. So I ended up in a situation that was traumatic, but I had to forgive myself, and I had to realize, because y'all had a trauma bond.
Yeah, you have to save them. Sometimes when you've been through a lot, that's like one of the biggest things that I work on when I work with people. I was like, I want to save people. And sometimes you can't save people, and you take on their burden, you take on their trauma trying to save them. And you can't do that. You can't do that. It's like it happened, like in like put on your life jacket first before you go and help someone else. You
Hello.
can't, because if their life jacket on and the boat goes down, you're sinking, and now they're afloat, and you're gone. That's what usually happens. We drown ourselves in those relationships because we're trying to save the other person and we forget about ourselves. Like, because you're not even healed. How can you help them? How can you help them? You don't even know what to do with yourself.
Yeah.
How you gonna help them navigate what they're going through? Like you said, self-forgiveness, self-compassion, and tapping into what we've been through and trying to heal that before you worry about helping someone else or trying to do that. So our advice to you, Roberta, is forgive yourself, have compassion for yourself, and actually find those areas that you feel like you have safety in. And sometimes we have bad coping mechanisms and try to transform those into like more healthier coping mechanisms. Yeah. So, well, that's the end of that game. I want to move on. So we're going to end it right here. And I would like for you to end this podcast where it's like some advice or some recommendations for the listeners.
Yeah. I think the best advice that I could give anybody on their healing journey is definitely make sure that, again, you process your own pain before you try to publicly talk about it. But also, I would sit here and say that you're deserving of healing. You're deserving getting past your trauma, and that there is really life after sexual assault. There's life after abuse. You really can take your power back. It's just up to you, but be patient with the process. Trust yourself in the process. Trust your process. And trust the God that you serve, right? Because those things are going to be the thing that's going to get you on the other side. That's definitely what I would say. I would also recommend, like, get some professional help. It is okay to go see someone. It is okay to go sit on the couch. For all my believers, I always tell people you can have the cross and the couch. You do not have to choose between your relationship with God and going to see a professional counselor. For me, it's 11 years post sexual assault. I still go to therapy, right? Because I've had several traumas in my life, but it is absolutely okay. If, in my opinion, going to therapy is you getting your power back because you're making a decision that you're not going to allow what happened to you to continue to define you. So get some professional help. And if you're not a therapy person, read some books. Like I said, one of my favorite books is Your Body Keeps the Score. Start there. It's a great book on how to really understand how your body responds to trauma. And so that's what I would say.
Thank you so much. I agree with that. If we don't want the professional, it's always a way. It's always education. Just educate yourself as much as possible. Like I said, put a name on it. Just the first way of educating yourself is putting a name on it, knowing exactly what you're going through, that awareness stage, self-awareness. Bring yourself aware of what you're going, because we live in a place of when stuff happens to us, it stores in the back of our head, our subconscious. So we have to bring it forward. You have to just start being aware of what you're going through and put names to things so that you can bring it forward. When these things happen, like, oh, this is happening again. This is this. You know what I'm saying? Instead of, oh, this is just part of my normal routine. No, this is something that I need to work on. This is happening again. So actually putting a name on it and recognizing and bringing things from the back of your head to the front of your head and being more conscious of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, can you please tell the listeners where they can find your social media, your website, everything, your book, everything?
Yeah. So I'm on social media as Leah M. Forney. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Leah M. Forney. My website is www.leahmforney.com. You can read up on me, a little bit about Save Me. I have a podcast as well. It's called Hey Queen Thrive. It's on all the podcasting platforms. So definitely check it out. Then all my books are on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles. If you just search Leah M. Forney, you will find all my books. I have 9 in total. I just released my 9th book in January. So yeah, definitely go check them out.
Thank you again for coming on, and I truly appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Are you feeling isolated and weighted down by the past trauma and challenges? Do you struggle with feeling stuck, powerless, and yearning for a place where you can truly be yourself without fear of judgment? Imagine if you could transform your pain into a powerful source of strength and empowerment. Picture a life where each day you feel more confident, more in control, and deeply connected to a supportive sisterhood that understands and uplifts you. Well, I invite you to join our Facebook group, Sister, Let's Heal Together. It's a safe place where you can share your story, be truly heard, loved on, and understood. It's a judgment-free zone where you find the support and understanding you need. If you're ready to take the next step in your healing journey, click the link in the show notes to join Sister Let's Heal Together. Together, become part of a sisterhood that supports and empowers each other every day. We cannot wait to welcome you and hear your story. Signing out, your sister Do Love. Until next time, bye.